Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jackie Clark, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am super excited. We have got another incredible guest that's coming to share their story with us. So I'm going to hand straight over and ask if you want to tell everyone who you are and where you are in the world.
Yes, of course. The golden question. So I'm Charlotte Jackson and I'm a holistic coach who's based in London. I actually was in Australia for about 10 years, but I just moved back for just over 4 years ago, which is all part of the story that I'm about to share. So yeah, that's who I am and where I'm from. Sounds a bit like an episode of Blind Date.
Amazing. I promise I won't be setting you up with anyone. You're all good.
Okay.
But we will be talking about your story, which is always my favorite thing. So we always start at the same point with everybody's journey is what was that moment that led you to realize that you needed to heal, that something needed to change, that something wasn't right? Like, when was that kind of turning point for you? So if you take us back to the beginning and tell us a little bit about that journey, and then we'll
Yeah.
dive into more about the story.
Okay, sure. So I suppose kind of growing up and going through life up until late 20s, I think I was one of those people that didn't really realize that I was miserable and unhappy, and I was just kind of going through the motions and binge drinking a lot and all of the things that people do. And I ended up living in Australia for 10 years, which I just touched on. And whilst I was there, I became a crystal meth addict. So that was the low point and the turning point, I suppose, that really kind of slapped me in the face and made me realize there's actually something deeply wrong here. Like something is going on within me that is now kind of, yeah, manifested as this drug addiction. And you can't really avoid a drug addiction. If you're in it, you're in it, and you either have a choice that you face what's going on and you heal, or you just stay there. So yeah, that was the big turning point for me.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that's it, it's such a place to be. And having that realization that actually this isn't just who I am, there is
Mm.
something bigger going on here. There's something I need to look at or figure out or find out what's happening. Like, I think that that's an incredible kind of moment. So, like, that's amazing. But as you were kind of going through this, like, what did you have to accept about yourself in that moment to actually then start that journey? Because that must be quite a hard place to like realize where you've gotten to and then move from. So what was that like?
Well, I think the whole time that I was in addiction, I was always asking why, which I think from my experience of I work with addicts now through coaching, and a lot of people never get to the point of even asking why. They just kind of accept it. We're told such a narrative about addiction. It's almost beat in us from when we're children. If you touch a drug, you become an addict, which is actually not true. And that, there's many people who touch drugs and don't become addicts. So that, yeah, that's a narrative that I don't buy into. But I was always asking why. I was journaling all the way through, constantly just writing and writing. Why is this happening? What's going on? Trying to work out why I would treat myself that way, and constantly reflecting. And I think that that was really, really key to actually coming out the other side, because I was constantly wondering and trying to get to that root cause rather than just say, oh, I'm just an addict or I've got an addictive personality or whatever it might be. I knew that it was deeper than that and that there was an emotional root to what was happening.
I love that even in such a difficult space, there was that level of awareness, that level of actually, there's something bigger here. There's something that, that we need to look at, that we need to figure out, that we need to move through. And I think
Mm,
whether it's addiction or whether it's any type of healing, if you're sitting in that space of being super unhappy, asking that question, why, is such an important first step of
mm.
like, am I just
A
going to sit and
hundred
accept
percent.
my life,
Yeah.
or am
And
I
I think
actually going to do something?
what you just touched on there about being in that place and actually having the self-awareness. The funny thing is that addicts, the ones that I've come across and the ones that I met through addiction, a lot of addicts, I'd say the majority, are actually some of the most self-aware people that I've met. And it's almost the pain that they're suffering when they're an addict is because they're so aware of the pain that they're feeling, but they also don't want to feel it. So they're kind of using something to numb it and push it away. And I think a lot of people, again, going back to how there's a narrative around addiction, there's also a narrative around addicts, and they can
Mhm.
get branded they're selfish or they're off their head and they don't know what they're doing. And it's really disempowering when you're in that situation, because especially if you are someone who is self-aware and you're being reflective and you're trying to work through things, you can get branded with this label that's, oh, you're an addict, you don't really know what you're talking about, you don't know what you're doing. And people almost try and push this thing on you that they know what's best for you, when actually, and I'm sure you'll agree, having gone on your own healing journey, we actually, all of us, know what's best for ourselves. Deep down, we have the answers. And if we give ourselves the space to really listen and tap into that, that's when we can heal, because we're listening to our soul and we're listening to that little voice inside that's like, hey, like, listen to me. This is actually what you need. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting reflection, actually, that addicts do actually have the answers, but sometimes they get told that they don't. And that's part of the reason that they don't necessarily look for them.
Oh, absolutely. I think it like, and again, like regardless of whether it's drugs, alcohol, food, regardless of what the addiction is, and like sometimes people even have like what we label positive addictions, where
Mm-hmm.
like, so my thing was like going running to the point where I injured myself. And actually, it was still an unhealthy habit. Like I was still doing it in an unhealthy way.
Mm-hmm.
But because I'm running and that's deemed a healthy thing, nobody was saying to me, like, oh, you don't know what you're doing and, you can't look after. Like, nobody was like shaming me for the way that I was dealing with my grief, even though I was actually doing damage to myself. Like, and isn't it such an interesting thing when you actually look at that and you go, regardless of the method that people use or choose to use or end up using or, fall into using, however they got there, it's just the method that they've chosen. It's not the person, it's not the
Yeah.
description of who they are or the identity that they exist within.
Yeah.
It
I think
literally,
it's really fascinating, because I think that drug addiction shows a person's pain to the rest of the world, and you can see it on them. You can see it on their body, you can see it in their face. They look how they feel, essentially. I would say, I mean, if you see pictures of me when I was an addict, I look haunted. Like I just look like a shadow of the person that I am now. And I think that because of that, that's why addiction to drugs and substances and alcohol, whatever it might be, has this really negative stigma around it. But in reality, like you said, the person who's got a running addiction or the gym addiction or a food addiction, whatever it is, they're feeling that same pain and discomfort and everything inside, but they're just not showing it outwardly to the rest of the world. It just doesn't show in such a kind of shocking way. And a lot of addicts don't end up like I did. They don't end up addicted to crystal meth or homeless or in crack dens. They kind of function and they have jobs and families, and that is really tough as well, because they're suffering every single day, and the whole weight of the world is on their shoulders, and they're trying to hold it together, which is this added extra pressure. I think the fact that I kind of let myself get to the bottom of the pit in a way was actually a relief, because I didn't have to hold up a pretense of, oh, this is what's happening and I'm still holding down my job and everything's okay. It was like, no, clearly nothing is okay right now. And everyone knows it.
I think as well when you look at that stereotype of like, you were saying like, drug addicts, alcohol addicts, like people who display their addiction in a way that makes other people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's the critical piece. Like you going and overeating or having a eating disorder that nobody knows about doesn't put anything on anybody else. And if society feels comfortable with what they're surrounded by, then it's not a problem. But actually, when you're confronted, as you said, with somebody who has got, a drug addiction and they look like a shell of themselves, and you can see physically that something isn't right, that then puts a pressure on the people around to do something and accept and acknowledge that space that that person's in and deal with that person's feelings and, actually have to step into, and especially with friends, family, people who might have contributed towards the reason why the person's in that position. Like there's such a challenge in, when somebody's in a place of healing and they're trying to heal versus when you've come out the other side, like the conversations I'm able to have now with, my family, my friends, etc., about how I felt when I was in my darkest places are coming from a completely different place now. And it's so easy to have those conversations now because I'm not triggered by them anymore. I've healed myself. It's fine. But actually
Yeah.
at the time, I wasn't displaying anything that made people think that they needed to help me. I was
Yeah.
just doing
Or
it myself
intervene
and
or
yeah, just like
yeah. And
throwing it away.
I think you make a really good point actually about a sort of a substance abuse or yeah, addiction to anything like that that can really make family and friends feel very uncomfortable. I think particularly family because it highlights there's something dysfunctional going on.
Yeah.
And that can be really tricky, especially for parents to
Mm.
face that because parents generally, most parents do the best job that they can do with the knowledge that they have and the traumas that they've gone through as well. They know no one generally is out to hurt people on purpose. They're all trying their best. And I think that it can be really confronting to suddenly have your child become an addict because it's a sign that something's not right. And of course, you're going to question, did I do something to contribute to that? Or could I have prevented that? Or there's all these things that how did I miss the signs? Oh, I should have known. I know that my parents, they kind of, my mum particularly, she used to say a lot, I knew something was wrong, but I just didn't think it was that. But the fact of the matter is even if she had known, it wouldn't have changed anything anyway, because
Mm.
it was just a journey that I had to go on. And you can't really stop someone from going on that journey in the same way that you can't make someone heal from it either. It has to be your own choice and it has to be up to you to come out the other side.
Yeah. And again, like whether it's addiction or any other healing, it's exactly the same. You can't make somebody heal from trauma that they've been through. They have to choose that path themselves. And if they're not willing to do that, there's nothing that you can do to make somebody go on that journey. Like it just is the way that it is. And so you've kind of told us a little bit about like your kind of real low points, where you got to like, not being able to hold down their job anymore, being in a crack den, like all of these things that I'm sure most people will be like, whoa, like what was going on there?
Yeah.
Like that's quite a well, that's a lot. So
Yeah.
like what was that like bottom point like? Like, were there moments where you genuinely thought you weren't going to make it, you weren't going to be here to like fight the next day? Like, what was that like for you?
There were, it was actually very strange, I think. It was a real, um, just a very contrasting situation in that at times it felt like the first time I'd ever belonged somewhere and that I had these people around me that really understood me. Strangely, the people that I met on that journey were the first people that I'd ever met in my life that used to tell me things that were so positive about myself. And I had never been around people that had bigged me up so much, which felt really strange because I was thinking, but I'm living in a crack den and They encouraged me to start a business, which I'd never done before, and it was actually really successful until I kind of lost my grip on it. But so there was these really sort of positive, amazing aspects to what was happening. And then there was the flip side that also every single person that you're surrounded by is generally incredibly traumatized, going through their own shit, triggered really easily. A lot of people in a lot of victim mentality where it's very much like, ugh, everything's against me, the world is against me, which is quite tricky to be around. I think that's one thing that I didn't buy into when I was an addict. And that's one thing that really helped me get out of it as well, because I was always focused on what I could do to change and trying not to blame everyone around me. And also just noticing, even though I could obviously look into my family situation, childhood, all these things. Yes, those things happened, but you can acknowledge that things happened in your childhood or in your life that really hurt, were not okay, that maybe shouldn't have happened and that weren't fair to happen, whilst also then taking ownership and being like, but I'm actually going to sort this out and move on from it. And it's not necessarily blaming anyone. It's both things are true. Like, that was shit, but I'm also going to be okay and move on from it. And also just you not having to need the validation from people that hurt you, like not needing an apology or anything like that, but just being like, that it just is what it is, and it sucks, but I'm going to move on from it. But I have kind of gone off on a tangent here. So were there moments where I felt that maybe I wasn't going to come back? I always thought that addiction was just going to be a part of my life and just a chapter. I didn't think it was going to be something that was forever. I didn't think that it was going to be my life until the end of time. But having said that, there were a couple of situations that I got into, especially close to the end of addiction as well, like where I ended up in hospital. And it's quite interesting because I'm a really spiritual person now, and I was very open to it during addiction. But there are a lot of things that you can experience that are, if you're not a drug addict, you're a spiritual person and this is what you would believe, blah, blah. If you're a drug addict, you're having psychosis, right? So it was quite a strange time, because I was very much always thinking, oh my goodness, am I losing my mind? Or is there actually more to this world than I can see? And I was really aware of it. And then I would think, well, if I was losing my mind, I probably wouldn't think I was. So if I was having psychosis, I probably wouldn't wonder if it was psychosis. That's the only thing I think that kind of kept me being like, no, it's okay. But I mean,
Tether to the
yeah,
world. Like,
yeah.
it's okay. If I'm
Um,
questioning this, it must mean I'm okay.
yeah, well, it's like that saying that the insane person doesn't question if they're crazy, right? They just kind of go with it. So that was probably the thing that did keep me kind of yeah, but some of the stories that I have, if you listen, a lot of people would say you were just experiencing psychosis. Spiritual people would say you're experiencing a spiritual awakening. So it just kind of depends which side of the coin that you're on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess like when you're going through these massive changes, like regardless of what they are, there's always going to be a shift in who you are as a person, in what you believe, in, you know, how much you're willing to kind of lean into. And I remember like reading, or like I was listening to an audiobook. So I used to go running in like the height of my depression, and I got to the point where somebody said like, oh, you should listen to like really like uplifting books like while you're doing that, to like try like reprogram your brain. And I was like, you're insane, but okay, let's do it, because I mean, I've got nothing to lose at this point. So one of the first books that I listened to was Gabby Bernstein's Super Attractor. And it was
Okay.
literally wild, because obviously she would talk about like all of these like signs that you could see and all of your like spirit guides. And like it was so far away from anything that I believed that I was like, absolutely not. This is wild. Like, what on earth is this? Like, this woman's crazy. But then I remember one of the days, like I was listening to her and she was busy telling this story about like she was trying to get pregnant and she was really struggling and she was trying to figure out her path, and she basically asked to see lilies, and it was like out of lily season, and like like she like picked something that was like not going to just be easy for her to see everywhere. And I was living in the UK at the time, and it was the middle of winter, pretty much like this time of year. And I remember being outside and being like, you know what? If I see a butterfly, I'm going to believe this. Like, if I see a butterfly, I'm going to believe that this is the path, and I'm just going to go hell for leather down this path. Like, because there's no way that there should be a butterfly out in January in the middle of a storm, like in the UK. And literally on my run, I kid you not, I saw two butterflies in the middle of January. And like, ever since then, I was like, yeah, okay, maybe there's something to this. Like, let's
Yeah.
go. Like, it was
So
so wild.
it's so fascinating. And yeah, I mean, my so part of my healing journey was this massive spiritual awakening to the other side. And I actually had a friend who had passed away in 2019. And he was a really big supporter of mine. He was really always it knew everything that was going on, but was always so much like, Charlotte, you can do it. You've got this. Da, da, da. Even when I wasn't even trying to have this, he was like, "You've got it. You can do it." And he was a big supporter of mine. And so when he died, I was really, really heartbroken. And he was the one person that I think I said that a lot of people just write addicts off as not knowing what they're talking about, what they're doing. And he was always like, what do you need? And he would have really listened to me. And just before he died, I said to him, look, all I need is a safe place to live, because at the moment I'm kind of bouncing around. I'm in and out of this crack den. It's just not safe. And to not have to worry about money for 2 or 3 months. If I had those two things, I would not be a drug addict anymore. Like, that's all I need. Just some space and time to sort my own head out, get into a good routine, and I knew that I would be fine. And he said, okay, come over, let's talk about it. We'll work out how we can make it happen. And then he died. And I remember getting all these signs from him. And because I was an addict, I was really pushing them away, because I just thought I was going crazy. And I used to say it all the time. I thought, I am going crazy. And also, I can't tell anyone, because they will think that I'm going crazy, because everyone knows I'm a drug addict. I was always really open about my addiction. I told my family and friends, like, well, probably about 2 years in, I told my parents, and it was 4 years in total. So everyone knew. And I was thinking, I can't tell anyone that my best friend is communicating with me from the other side. That sounds really wild. But some of the stories that I have, even if I tell them to people that don't believe in that stuff, they say that's some pretty wild coincidences, and they're just not coincidences. And he is a huge reason that I am where I am today, because he was literally right there with me the entire time. And it was just crazy. We went into lockdown in Melbourne, and they were obviously saying to everyone, stay home, you can't leave your house, blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, I don't want to stay home. I live in a crack den. I don't want to be locked in here at all. That is actually my worst nightmare. The one thing that I had was the freedom to leave. And I was walking around one night, and I walked past the church where my friend had had his funeral, and I just literally got on my knees and I was crying. I was like, MJ, I miss you so much. I just don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to get out of this situation. Like, it's just fucked. And went back to the crack den. And as I went back, I went past a 7-Eleven, and I walked in, and there was someone standing about a meter, maybe a meter and a half away from me. And he was wearing a hood, and he looked up, and it was MJ. And I was standing there thinking, this is when I was thinking, I am losing my mind. I thought, I'm actually seeing things. It wasn't just, I think a lot of people, when they experience grief, you kind of see someone, oh, it looks a bit like this person, and it's not them, obviously. And then it's just a split second. This was like someone staring me in the face. It was his twin, apart from he didn't have a freckle on the end of his nose, but everything else about him, it was identical. So I ran, because I was so scared, back to the crack den. I'm like in my bedroom, freaking out. And then someone who lives in the house came into my room, and they're just playing on their phone doing something. And then they just, I mean, obviously I didn't tell anyone what had just happened. But he's going through Spotify and he's flicking through music, and then he just starts playing the song from MJ's funeral that was the main song, that was, you know, the video of him was played to, and all these things. And again, I'm like, turn it off. Freaking out. I go on YouTube and I'm just flicking through videos thinking, you know, just trying to dissociate, I guess, from what was happening. And this video pops up, and it's an interview with Oprah and some celebrities. And one of them says, I think it's the Olsen twins actually, and she said, oh yeah, I used to have a freckle on my face, but it disappeared. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, this is too weird. And I just put my phone away and just went to sleep. I woke up the next day and I had a thought just pop into my head: go to a homeless shelter. And this is something that I could have done anytime. I mean, I had basically been homeless for 2 years, and it had never occurred to me go to a shelter ever. So I go to this shelter and I said, look, this is my situation. I'm living in a crack den. I'm a crystal meth addict. I don't want to be, but I just can't get out of the cycle of, I'll get a bit of money, leave, find somewhere to live, don't have any money, go back, then I'm surrounded by it, and then it happens again. And it just was just so hard to pull away from the environment. So they said, look, we're really sorry. Obviously, COVID lockdowns are happening, and we actually can't put you in a shelter. We have to put you in a 4-star hotel. So they moved me to this 4-star hotel. I know. I was like, oh no, that's a shame. So they moved me to this 4-star hotel. And I'm sitting there again thinking, this is pretty crazy. I mean, I actually thought someone was playing a trick on me. Now I see it as, I think it's just divine alignment. Just you take one step and doors open, right, when you're meant to go in the right direction. So I was sitting in this hotel thinking, this is really crazy. And then we go out of lockdown actually for, I think it was like a week or something. And I was experiencing a lot of, I mean, you could say there was sort of dark thoughts or spiritual attacks or whatever it might be, just uncomfortable dreams and things that were happening at this point. And I had gotten it into my head that someone had cursed me. That's what I was thinking, because I was experiencing very quick coincidences all the time, which now I would say obviously synchronicities and the signs that you're on the right path, but they were freaking me out. It was intense. So I went to this shop in the city and I just said, look, I think someone's cursed me. I need some kind of crystal. I don't know what I don't even think I knew what I was asking for really. And obviously the woman was thinking, gosh, this girl seems pretty like neurotic and highly strung. And she said, look, why don't you go upstairs and get your cards read by someone? There's a lady up there, she's doing card readings. That might really help you just get some answers. So I was like, okay. So I got upstairs, never had my cards read, didn't know what to expect. And as soon as I sat down, this woman looked at me and she said, you had a friend who passed away recently. He's here right now. That was like the first thing she said in this reading. And I hadn't mentioned this at all to the person downstairs or anyone. And she's just there saying, yeah, he's here right now. And he just wants me to tell you that he knows that you're afraid, but you do not need to be scared anymore. Like, he's got you. You just need to keep taking the next step. Just keep going, and he will make sure that everything works out. So just keep going. Like, don't be afraid. Just go, next step, next step, next step. And I just said to her, oh my goodness, that was exactly what I needed to hear. And I said, I wasn't even going to come up here, but the woman downstairs suggested I did. And she said, oh, was that Rachel or Akira? And Akira is MJ's daughter's name. So again, another crazy sort of, I mean, Akira is not a very common name. I don't think I've ever actually met another Akira apart from his daughter and the woman in that shop. So again, I was thinking, okay, this is pretty wild now. Like, I'm getting a lot of evidence from not just me, but actually from other people that maybe this is a real thing. So I go back to the hotel. To this day, I don't actually know how this happened, but I got a notification on my phone on Instagram, and it said, you have a new close friend. And I don't even use that feature. Don't even really don't particularly know what it's for, but it said, you have a new close friend. And it was his Instagram account that had popped up and been added as a close friend. And to this day, he is the only close friend that I have on my Instagram account. And then I got a call from a support worker who just said, hi, Charlotte, just letting you know that because of COVID, the government is letting people take their pension money out early. So if you want, you have access to $10,000. Do you want us to help you sort that out? And so obviously I said yes. And then I used that money to get an apartment, and then I got all my things out of storage. And I was still at this point, like kind of sporadically using meth. But once I got to that apartment, and once I had that time and that space to really like just sit, then after I think it was probably a couple of weeks, I just had this sort of epiphany moment where I was journaling, and it was like a light bulb went off that, is it any wonder that your life looks like this when you're treating yourself so unkindly? And is it any wonder that your life's gone to shit when you're surrounded by people that treat you like shit and you accept it, and all of these things? And it just was this like, I just suddenly realized, oh my goodness, this whole time I've just been so unkind to myself and hated myself, and I don't love myself, and I don't take care of myself, and in any shape or form, mind, body, soul, like none of it. And I just decided that moment, like, that's it, that's enough. Like, I'm just done. And I, yeah, threw the drugs in the bin, have never touched them since. And yeah, it was crazy how quickly it happened. And it was only actually recently that I realized, I was telling this story to someone, and I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, the two things that I told him that I really needed before he died is exactly what I ended up with. The not have to worry about money for a few months and a safe place to live. And I just was like crying with gratitude, thinking, oh my goodness, this person who was such a big supporter of me when he was alive, and he still was there the whole time when I was going through it, even though he wasn't there physically. Like, his energy was just all around and just there, and he's still around now, but it was so strong then that I could really feel him. So yeah, it was a really magical experience, and it really opened my eyes to just how incredible the world is, and how little we actually know about it, and how little we understand about it. But if you're open to it, like, magical things can happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love that. I had like goosebumps so many times like when you were telling that story. Like, it's just incredible. And again, like, you have to open up to it in order for any of it to happen. Like, I always say to people, somebody can say something to you, you could read something, you can hear something, you can see something, but if you're not in the space to actually accept it and hear it and see it, it's still not going to work. And, a lot of people will say this on the other side of addiction, where they'll be like, you'll have this epiphany moment of like, oh, I'm going to do this. And they'll literally be sitting there going, yeah, we've been telling you to do that for the last 10 years. Like,
Yeah.
what is wrong with you? But like, until you get to the point where you can accept that that's what you need to do, and you need to take those steps, and everything lines up for you in that moment where you are, mentally able to move into that space, that's what it takes. And to actually have all of those things happen, and to have, such a close friend be able to like support you through that, even though they weren't here. Like,
Yeah.
it is, as you said, like, there's just such magic in that. There's such magic in
Yeah.
it. Like,
It's just so beautiful. It's like, I don't think we actually have a word to describe it. I think that's why it's so hard to describe, because anyone that's experienced it knows what I'm talking about, but it's really hard to put it into words. It's like this deep feeling of gratitude that makes you cry, but you're not sad. It's almost, you're so happy. I think it's actually the feeling of unconditional love, which is quite a rare feeling, because obviously humans, we have emotions and all these things, but this is like, it was just this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like, someone cares so much about me, and they will do anything to help me and support me. And yeah, it's just I'm sure there are many times that he saved my life and moved my path from here to there, because there was lots of crazy stuff that was happening just before, I had that kind of moment. And I feel he was trying so hard to get through to me, and I was rejecting it so much. I was like, no, this is not real, da, 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 until I literally saw him standing in front of me. And then I had no choice but to think, okay, maybe maybe, okay, I'm listening, like maybe. And once I actually opened up to it, that's when then everything just went boom, 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 and everything fell into place. And I know that I was never meant to be an addict forever, because it's such a deep calling that I have on my heart to help other addicts and to let them know that there is light on the other side. And I did it without apart from my guardian angel, give him some props, but I did it without any support. I didn't have friends, family. I was living literally on the other side of the world from my friends and family. I was 10,000 miles away. I didn't go to rehab. I didn't go to therapy. I did all of my healing completely on my own. And we are told, oh, that's impossible, but it's not. It's literally not. And one of the things that I realized, I have actually some really sweet videos of me when I was in that apartment, and I'm like this little tiny shell, and I'm just like, I've stopped taking the drugs, but I'm like not really sure what I'm doing. And I sort of intuitively had decided to start, because I'd realized how nasty I was being to myself. I intuitively had decided to start talking to myself in a really positive way and affirming things to myself. And I didn't even read any books to get this information. I just kind of like instinctively knew that's what I needed to do. And so I'm reading out these affirmations in this little mouse voice, and like I obviously don't really believe them, but it's just crazy how you can actually reprogram your mind. And what I started to realize from all these coincidences that I was experiencing is whatever I believe to be true is actually, it then comes out in the world in front of me. So if I'm thinking like, this is dark, this is evil, this is da 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 da, it happens. If I think this about myself, it happens. And I was thinking, this is really weird. Everything I'm thinking is manifesting into my physical reality. So then if I start to think more positively, does that mean that that's going to happen? So I was kind of playing with it just to see, is this possible? So I started to tell myself, and this is what I say in this video, I'm like, I've decided I just don't believe in addiction. It's like, I've just decided I don't believe in addiction. And if I don't believe in it, then I can't be an addict. And I just used to tell myself that, well, you can't be an addict because addiction is not real. Now, obviously, there's a lot of science backing up that addiction is real, but I was just playing with this. Well, if I believe this, what will happen? And I kind of tricked myself into believing all these things. I decided, you know what, I'm going to decide that addiction is a choice, and I'm choosing not to be an addict. And I was just like basically brainwashing myself with this completely new narrative that was against everything I had ever been told about addiction ever. It was like I decided all of the things I'd ever been told. Oh, it's really hard to stop being an addict. It's really hard to walk away from it. Da, da, da. And I just kept going, who says? Why? Like, why can't it be the opposite? And I just kept going, no, like, I'm just not believing it. And I honestly just brainwashed myself. And that's how I think I am still drug free today, because I've never thought, oh, I can't, like, oh, I don't want to be around it, or I don't want to go near it, or like I'm really tempted or anything like that. It's like I'm actually so indifferent to it. I've been around a lot of drugs like since I became drug free, and gone on nights out and still like go partying with people, and I just have no desire. And that's what's so interesting, is like I've reprogrammed my mind and created this completely new identity that is just not someone I'm just not someone who uses drugs, and that's just who I am now. And anyone can do that. And that's the really cool thing. And I want people to know that they can do that, that I'm not special. I'm not like this magical person that just managed to do it. It's like anyone can do that. And that is really cool and really powerful. So I know that is the reason that I came out the other side, because everyone needs to know that. And I'm proof that they can.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, again, as you said, like you can do it with anything. Like, it doesn't have to just be an addiction or healing, or like when I look at running my business, so I remember being that kid in school who, when I had to stand up and do, a talk in front of the class, I'd literally be like dying and sweating and wanting to throw up and like not being able to talk and like just like not being able to do it. And then when I look at myself now and I'm like, I'm more than happy to stand on a stage and talk to 10,000 people. Like it does not faze me at all. There's nothing
So
in my
cool.
nervous system that
Yeah, it's so
like that
cool.
concerns me. And like you look at those two people and you go, it's physically impossible for those two people to be the same person. Like it's
Yeah,
physically impossible, but yet it is. But yet that
yeah.
is me. This
And it's
is who
not
I am.
like you're standing up and going, oh, like I still feel nervous, but I'm doing it anyway. You're like, I'm actually
Right.
completely indifferent. Like I actually enjoy it. I actually feel calm and collect. It's so strange. It's like you have a completely new mind, personality, identity, and like you said, you can do it with anything. And it's the first part of it, I think, is really becoming aware. It's like becoming the observer. So as soon as you have that moment, and that was that epiphany moment for me, was where I was like, whoa, I'm talking to myself really nastily. And I didn't even know that this whole time for my entire 30 plus years of existence, I'd been walking around calling myself a stupid fucking bitch, stupid idiot. Forever, imagine being in a relationship with someone who you drop a pen on the floor and they're like, you stupid fucking idiot. You, it's like emotionally so abusive. That person is basically just abusing you every single day of your life. And that is who you hear in your head running in the background. That's like your subconscious telling you all this stuff. As soon as you become aware of it, that's when you can then change it. So the awareness is the first step. And it's not actually that difficult, I don't think. It's almost sounds so simple that people would think surely that wouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah. And I think like that is a lot of healing and a lot of this like process that we go through. Like it takes time and it is hard, but just because it's hard, it doesn't mean it's complex. Like it
Mm,
is actually simple. That moment of having that awareness and realizing that you're being really mean to yourself is the easy moment. It's that like realization. It's then that reprogramming where you have
mm.
to be disciplined enough to say nice things to yourself.
Yes.
It's
And
the
I think it can
hard work.
be, even though it's hard, it can still be fun in a way. So you think, or the hard part is the consistency, I think, which is what you were just touching on. It's like just catching it like each time and keep going with that and not just like going oh and just like defaulting back to old programs that are running, but like because that is hard because you have these neural pathways in your brain. And I think people use this ski slope analogy. If you imagine all these skiers going down a slope and that's like where you've been skiing for your whole life, there's this big ridge there that's in your brain. If you start going off like right down a different slope, like it's not as easy, but after a while that then becomes a ridge and the other one kind of like fades away. And that's what you're doing every time you're catching what you're saying and like reprogramming it with something positive. And yeah, so that's the hard part. But then it becomes fun because you realize, you suddenly go, oh my goodness, I just looked in the mirror and I actually thought I looked quite good. Or you suddenly realize that you're at your default is, oh my goodness, I'm great. Or and you realize that you've actually changed something. And then you start to see it reflected. And isn't it crazy how much it is reflected back to you through your relationships? You can even have relationships with the exact same people and they haven't actually changed, but you've changed completely and they treat you like a different human being
Mhm.
because you're treating yourself differently. It's like really interesting.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Like, so this conversation I could have with you for like a whole week. You'd never get to the bottom of it because I think it's incredible. But I want to ask you like the next kind of piece of the puzzle, which is obviously you kind of went through this. You had this sort of like low level awareness that you would always kind of work in this space. And now you obviously do work in the space and you do kind of help addicts and through coaching and kind of being that sort of safe space for them. Like how did that transition happen from you kind of getting clean yourself to
Yeah.
then actually being this person now?
Yeah. So I think, and this is really common as well, I think when people go on a healing journey, is that you come out the other side and you just kind of want to fix everyone, especially I think family, like parents. You kind of come back and you think, I've got the answers, like I know how to do all this stuff, and da, 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 da. So when I first came, so this all happened to me in Australia, and then I moved back to the UK after I got off the drugs. I thought, yeah, it's probably time to say goodbye to this chapter of my life and go home. So I moved back in 2020. And that was another thing people said, there's no way that you're going to go back in the middle of COVID. Australia's in lockdown. And I was like, well, just watch me. I've got an angel on my side, and I somehow managed to get out of the country. So I moved back. And yeah, at first I really did want to just help everyone and do everything. But actually, in reality, I needed to take the time to ground back into real life and come back down from, I mean, I was up in the ethers somewhere, you know, hanging out with the angels, and who even knows what I was doing. I was kind of like, I was really up there. I really needed to come back down to earth and like ground and just be a bit more, yeah, grounded is the right word, but really just like normal, I suppose. Live a kind of a bit more of a it's not boring, but just a steady life. And so I did start to take courses and things. So I became a Reiki master, and that kind of really opened my my eyes and opened the energetic side of things for me. And I still use a lot of energetic, not Reiki specifically, but a lot of energetic practices in my coaching. I did an EFT practitioner's course. So I was kind of doing all these courses and things to really more actually, I suppose, like for myself at the time, just as a way of doing more healing. And it's so interesting how you can do all these little things as you go along, and then now it's kind of all come together. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like now I've got all these little things that I can pull on that I use in my coaching. So when I say that I'm a holistic coach, that means treating everything mind, body, soul, not just the talk therapy. And I think that's why for me personally, the alignment of the mind, body, soul, and opening up to that spiritual side of things as well was kind of the missing piece for me. And we've touched on your nervous system and things like that already. And if you're not treating the body as well, then you can do all the affirmations and the mind work and all these things that you want. But if you're not anchoring that into your nervous system, then that's also, it's just not going to create lasting change. So I believe that you really do need a mind, body, and soul, whole, full, everything. Look at everything and see all the little parts and see the bits and pieces that need your attention. So I think, yeah, the way that I kind of transitioned from addict into coach, it's been 4.5 years now that I've been off the drugs. And you'll notice actually I never use the term clean anymore, because I really don't like the connotation that addicts are dirty. So I stopped using that a couple of years ago. But yeah, it's been that long now since I've been off the drugs and away from them. But I've been coaching for about 1.5 years. And I think I really needed those 3 years, like I said, to kind of find all these practices and really ground into life. And I started working a 9 to 5, like just to do it. And quite quickly I was like, well, okay, so this isn't actually for me. There's something like greater calling me. But I and I think if you have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, and like I said, I started my business, a different business when I was an addict, and I'd got a little taste of it. And it was like an itch that I just like couldn't let go of. And the more that I sort of lent into it, the more I was like, yeah, this is 100% what I need to be doing. And at the start, I actually really focused a lot on women and women with low self-confidence and self-esteem, because that was obviously something that I'd really struggled with and was kind of what had led me into addiction in the first place. And I'd always said like, oh no, like I the addiction coaching, that's not for me. It's not for me. But as soon as I stepped into it, it was exactly what you said before, where my whole like team were like, yeah, oh my God, for God's sake, she's finally realized what she's meant to be doing. So it was definitely meant for that. And it really is. I just yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And obviously I've done the certifications and everything like that along the way, but it was, yeah, just like a slow process, I suppose, of reaching into all these different little areas. And then now it's all like come together into this holistic coaching, which is just really beautiful.
I love that. I love that so much. I think like that is the journey, like, isn't it? Like a lot of people feel like they have to figure it out really quick and like have it all sorted and know what they're going to do and like instantly be fixed and get on and do the thing, and actually like there's so much more to it than just fixing and
Yeah.
doing. Like it's about that process, and I think that that is like there's a magic in that in itself, in actually going through that process. So I normally ask quite a broad question around what advice you would have for anybody that's kind of coming through healing, but I want to actually make that super specific for you and ask you to speak specifically to anybody who's struggling with addiction. So anybody who's
Mm.
listening who is struggling with addiction, doesn't want to be in that place, but doesn't know how to move forward. What would
Mhm.
you say the first step is for them to like actually start
Cool.
moving?
So, say with my clients, I actually have three kind of pillars that I work with when it comes to addiction. And the very first one is challenging the narrative. So that is challenging the narrative that you have around addiction, but also around yourself, the labels that you put on yourself, really uncovering the limiting beliefs, the things that you believe to be true about yourself, and just, like I said, challenging them and actually looking at them and saying, is that actually true? Why is that true? Why do I believe that to be true? And as soon as you start to kind of investigate a little bit and really kind of uncover all these beliefs and behaviors and patterns that you've got, that's the first step. The really challenging like everything about your life and everything you believe to be true, and just looking at it from a completely different perspective, and just for a moment thinking, could the opposite be true? Like, why do I think I'm stupid? Maybe I'm not. Maybe someone just told me that when I was 5 years old and I've just internalized it for the whole rest of my adult life, whatever it might be. Yeah, really challenging the narrative is super important. And I think if there is a little part of you that is, and there will be, to anyone that is like ready to go on that healing journey, they'll be listening to this and there'll be something inside of them that's kind of like, oh, like they feel like a pull or something that's like, I'm ready to do that, or I'm like, and you just suddenly feel, you don't have to like feel, oh, I'm ready, but it's like this little nudge that you get from somewhere that's like, go that way. Kind of like how you had the nudge to listen to the Super Attractor book and you just did, and then you were like, whoa, and then you sing butterflies, and then everything kind of like opened up, and like it just kind of all, there's just like a little nudge from somewhere that tells you to like go in that direction or do that thing. Just listen to it, because you actually have all the answers inside of you. And that's what's so beautiful about coaching. It's not that someone is coming and saying, do this. It's saying, someone coming and saying, what do you actually think? Like, you have the answers. Let's like get them out of you, because they're already in there, and just like uncovering that and creating this new identity, and just like getting rid of all the crap that's been put on you that you've been carrying around for years, and uncovering who the real you is underneath all of that.
Mm, amazing. Yeah. Yep, 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 yep. All of that is beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I love that. Okay, so final question before we wrap
Yeah.
up. This is one of my favorite questions that I love asking people. Obviously, healing is an ongoing journey. There's always something that we can dive into, we can look at, we can, better for ourselves, etc. So I always love to ask people, like, what is your next level of healing? What is the next thing that you want to be focusing on, working on, moving towards, just to show people that it's not like a one and done. We continue this journey in different like facets as we go through. So what does
Yeah.
that mean?
It's very interesting actually, because I think that what I've noticed is that when you kind of have done the big stuff. So for me, it was like overcoming the addiction. Oh, like that's the big thing that I did. And obviously that's a huge thing. It's really obvious. I've managed to stop lots of things like toxic relationships, and started talking to myself on different, blah blah blah. But now, because I'm at a different kind of, I guess, level with my self-confidence and all of that, the things that come up are so much more subtle, and sometimes you don't necessarily notice. Like, you'll just be going along like living your life, and then suddenly like something happens, but you don't get massively triggered by something. Like, you might get triggered by it, but it just is, it's really just yeah, I think it's just, for me, the next level of healing is really practicing what I preach, I think, and really it's just embodying all the stuff that I talk about and not just being someone that's like, oh yeah, like if you just do this, like it's like, no, like I do it too. And you do have to keep doing it. And you do notice that little things come up and you know, you might say, for me, actually, like I'm single, so I'm dating here and there. Every night I kind of dip in and out. And dating is a very interesting one, actually, because it really reveals a lot of where you're at and the kind of things. And every now and again I kind of see myself like hearing back to old patterns and behaviors, and I'm like, whoa, Charlotte, no, I know that he's really hot and he's like 6'3" and covered in tattoos, but we're not going that way, okay? Like just don't be blinded by the good looks. Let's keep going this way. And yeah, it is like a constant thing, but it's not a struggle anymore. I think that's the difference. It's not like I've already been going down the ski slope for a while, so now it's kind of almost comical. Like when something happens, you pick up on it, and then you just get to practice like what you already know. You have the tools to practice it. Yes, you still get triggered. Yes, you go home and your family like make you want to explode. But you have the tools to be able to go, oh my goodness, like I'm getting triggered right now, and you kind of like remove yourself from a situation, whatever it might be, and then you can like come back and do it. And I think, like I said to you, the way that people change around you when you actually go on this healing journey too is so fascinating. I mean, my relationship with my parents is an amazing example of that. I was locked in a house with them during lockdown when I came back, and I'd been away for 10 years and I was a recovered crystal meth addict. So there was a lot for us to work through. And we have an amazing relationship now, but we did not when I got back. Like when I got back, it was everyone was getting triggered, like left, right, and center. But now we are, and I've actually seen the change in them, that my dad's become like more physically affectionate. My mum apologizes like when she snaps, which was never a thing ever growing up, and sometimes I can't even believe when it happens. But yeah, it's just yeah, it's like a never ending journey, but not in like this, like, ugh, like it's such a slog. It's more just like it's actually fun, and it's almost exciting to see like what's the next thing that you could kind of work on and embody, and then like see the change reflected in your life.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. It's so funny. So I've got somebody close to me in my life who's just going back into the world of dating.
Mm-hmm.
And we were having this conversation actually, funny enough, the other day about how like you came out of a relationship for a reason, and it's a really easy ski slope to just fall back into the same pattern because obviously you know the pattern so well. And like we were saying, the key thing is that there's no compromising on date one. Because if you're compromising at that point, like you're already going down the wrong path. And I think that that's so valid for so many areas of your life. If you are looking to get a new job, like no compromising on day one, it's going to end
So
up in a bad
true.
place. You
Yeah.
know, if you're looking to go into a new friend group or, you know, into a charity organization that you want to support, or like whatever it is that you're doing, like no compromising on day one.
And
If you
actually
can do that,
knowing your standards and your
oh,
boundaries so that you then do know when you're compromising, because a lot of
yeah.
the time people like don't even know they're compromising because they don't even know what they stand for, and then they wonder, they're like, oh, actually I don't really like that. If you actually know like what's a yes and what's a no, then you can easily say yes or no to things that don't actually align with you, and having the belief and the trust to know that if you say no, something better comes along. And not talking necessarily about dating, but like you said, jobs, friendships, whatever it might be. Yeah, having the courage to say no when things don't align is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because one of the things that I always think about in this situation. So we have a Labrador, and she was a rescue. So she went to a rescue center, but I never say that she was a rescue dog because when she got sent to the center, she was 4 months old and she had over 100 people apply for her to become her owners.
Oh my
So
god.
like it was literally wild.
Yeah.
But it was so funny because I remember that interaction, and it was going to be our first dog. We had two cats already. I worked from home. Like we had a very, and we were in the UK at the time. Like I had a very specific like spot in my life that she had to fit into. Otherwise, it wasn't going to work for us. And the adoption agency, like I sent an email to them to say like I just wanted to ask some more questions because her write-up was really small. And they came back to me with this like super sassy email of being like, we'll put you on the list. There's a lot of people who are interested. And I went back to them and I was like, take me off the list because if you're not going to answer my questions, I don't want the dog. Like I was like, I am not letting this dog come into my household if it is not a good fit for me and for her,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to just bring her in and then rehome her again. Like, are you people crazy? And literally, I then got a call from the kennel staff to be like, can we talk to you about having this dog? Because the fact that you're willing to give her up before you've even got her to make sure that it's right for her, they were like,
Yeah.
actually, like that's incredible. And it's that exact thing of like me having my boundaries and saying no and being like, absolutely not. Like I'm not playing this game with you.
And
Got
being
me.
detached from the outcome as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
I was
like
like,
I
it'll
actually
be
don't
her or another
care
one.
if it's not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I take that outlook like with everything that I do. When I go and see a potential new client, I'll literally say to them, like, no pressure. Like, no pressure at all.
Yeah. And it has
Come
to
in.
work both ways, right? Like it's not that I mean, I would think it was a massive red flag in a coach if you met a coach and they're just like so eager to just like work with everyone.
Yeah.
Because you can't. Not everyone is a fit. Like sometimes you meet people and it's like you just know it's not going to work. And yeah, it's the same thing. You have to be okay with that and being and you know it needs to work both ways. Like you need to find the right coach for you and then it has to be the right client as well. And yeah, it's really very interesting because it does fit into like all aspects of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see people who have gone on a healing journey from the way that they deal with these transactions, like the way that they come into friendships, come into relationships, come into life, like come into situations. You can see people who are triggered and who are actually just like existing within the boundaries that they've set for themselves. And I think that
Yeah.
that is like, it's such a magical thing. And
Yeah.
for you as a coach to obviously be able to help addicts specifically coming into that space and getting to that place where they can live like that is so, so amazing.
Yeah.
And like I've loved this conversation. It's been so wonderful talking to you. As always, like we always put people's Instagrams at the bottom of the podcast, so anybody who's listening can obviously go in the show notes. You can go check out Charlotte, and you know go and chat with her. Like it's been so incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story, being so open about all of this. Like it's been so wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've loved it.
Amazing.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of The Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Diary of Discovery.